She sat across from me, cutting into the roast beef I had spent 3 hours preparing. The dining room was warm, filled with the rich, savory smell of rosemary and garlic. The candles flickered softly, casting a golden glow over the table. Everything looked perfect. It looked like a scene from a magazine. She smiled, wiping the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. She was beautiful, I had to admit that. She had bright, eager eyes and a laugh that sounded like bells. Younger than me, but not a child. "Sarah," she said, looking me right in the eyes. "You really have a lovely home. I'm so glad we met. It's so rare to make a real connection with someone these days." I smiled back. It was a practiced smile. One I had been rehearsing in the mirror for weeks. "I agree," I said, my voice steady and calm. "It is very rare to find someone who understands you. Someone you can trust." I picked up the bottle of red wine and leaned over to refill her glass. As I did, my eyes flicked to the man sitting next to her. My husband, David. He wasn't eating. He wasn't smiling. He was staring at his plate, his knuckles white as he gripped his fork. A single bead of sweat rolled down his temple, despite the cool air conditioning. He looked pale, like a man waiting for a judge to read a sentence. He knew my name wasn't Sarah. He knew this wasn't just a casual dinner party among new friends. He knew exactly who I was, and he knew exactly who she was. But she didn't. She had no idea that the woman pouring her wine was the wife of the man she had been sleeping with for the last 8 months. I set the wine bottle down with a soft clink. "David," I said, saying his name with a sweetness that made him flinch. "You haven't touched your potatoes. Are you not hungry?" He looked up at me, his eyes pleading, filled with a terror that almost made me feel pity. "Almost. I'm okay," he stammered, his voice dry. "Oh, don't be shy," the woman, her name was Jessica, said, placing a hand affectionately on his arm. I watched her fingers touch his sleeve. "Sarah made this just for us. You have to try it." I watched him swallow hard. "Yes, David. Eat. We have a long night ahead of us." To understand why I was serving dinner to my husband's mistress, and why I wasn't screaming or throwing plates, you have to understand the woman I used to be. You have to understand the life we had before the silence moved into our home. 6 months ago, I was happy. I know people say that in hindsight, but I really felt it. David and I had been married for 12 years. We were that couple that everyone else wanted to be. We finished each other's sentences. We had a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. I was 42, David was 45. We didn't have children. We had tried for a few years in our 30s, but it didn't happen for us. It was a painful season, full of tears and negative tests, but we had come out the other side stronger. We decided that we were enough for each other. We built a life of travel, quiet weekends, and shared goals. David was a successful architect. He was charming, articulate, and handsome in a way that had only improved with age. I worked part-time as a landscape designer, but mostly, I managed our lives. I took care of the house, the bills, the social calendar. I made sure his shirts were pressed and his coffee was ready exactly how he liked it, black, with a dash of cinnamon. Our home was my sanctuary. It was a beautiful, 2-story house with a large garden that I tended to obsessively. I loved the feeling of dirt in my hands, the smell of blooming jasmine in the spring. I loved creating beauty. Every evening, when David came home, the routine was the same. I would hear the garage door open, the heavy thud of his car door closing, and then the key turning in the lock. My heart would always do a little jump. Even after 12 years, I was excited to see him. "I'm home, Maya," he would call out. I would walk into the hallway, and he would drop his briefcase, loosen his tie, and pull me into a hug. He smelled like expensive cologne and cedarwood. It was the scent of safety. How was your day? He would ask, kissing my forehead. Better now, I would say. And I meant it. We didn't have secrets. Or at least, I didn't think we did. We shared passwords. We shared bank accounts. We left our phones on the kitchen counter, unlocked. I never felt the need to check his messages, and he never hid his screen from me. Why would he? We were partners. We were a team against the world. I remember one night specifically, about 7 months ago. It was our anniversary. We were sitting on the back patio, sharing a bottle of wine under the string lights I had hung up. The air was cool, and the crickets were chirping. David reached across the small table and took my hand. His grip was warm and firm. Maya, he said softly. I don't know what I would do without you. You're the only real thing in my life. I squeezed his hand back, feeling a swell of love in my chest. I'm not going anywhere, David. You're stuck with me. He laughed, but there was something in his eyes that night. A shadow. A flicker of something I couldn't quite read. I thought it was just emotion. I thought he was just feeling sentimental about our anniversary. I didn't know that he had already met Jessica. I didn't know that while he was holding my hand and telling me I was his world, he was already building another world with someone else. That night, we went to bed, and I fell asleep with my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was steady. Rhythmic. It didn't skip a beat. It didn't race with guilt. It scares me now, thinking back on it. How good of a liar he was. He didn't pull away. He didn't become distant. He didn't stop saying I love you. If anything, he became sweeter. He bought me flowers for no reason. He planned weekend getaways. He was compensating. He was buying his conscience off with roses and chocolates. But I didn't see it. I just saw a husband who loved his wife. I was living in a beautiful, fragile glass house, completely unaware that he was already holding the stone that would shatter it all. The first crack didn't come from a text message or a lipstick stain. It came from something much smaller. Something so insignificant that most wives would have ignored it. It started with the coffee. For 12 years, David drank his coffee black with a dash of cinnamon. It was a ritual. I would brew it, sprinkle the spice on top, and hand it to him. He would take a sip, sigh with contentment, and say, "Perfect." But one Tuesday morning, everything changed. I handed him his mug. He took it, brought it to his lips, and then set it down on the counter without drinking a drop. I'm actually running late, Maya, he said, checking his watch. I'll grab something near the office. He kissed my cheek, a quick, dry peck, and walked out the door. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the steaming mug. It was a small thing. A tiny thing. But it felt wrong. It felt like a note played out of tune in a song I knew by heart. The next day, it happened again. He didn't want the coffee. Then, the late night started. Big project in the city, he told me over the phone. The client is demanding. I might be here until 10. Okay, I said, looking at the dinner I had made. Don't work too hard. When he came home that night, the house was quiet. I was sitting on the sofa reading a book, but I hadn't turned a page in an hour. He walked in, looking exhausted. He loosened his tie and sighed. I'm beat, he said. I stood up to hug him. As I wrapped my arms around his waist, I buried my face in his shirt. I expected the smell of stale office air, coffee, maybe the faint scent of blueprints and ink. Instead, I smelled vanilla. It was faint, buried under his cologne, but it was there. Sweet, sugary vanilla. And something else. A light, floral perfume. Not mine. I wear musk and amber. This was flowery, like lilies or jasmine. I pulled back and looked at him. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. What is it? He asked. You smell nice, I said, testing him. He stiffened. Just for a fraction of a second. Oh? Must be the new air freshener in the office. They went crazy with it. He walked past me to the shower. My stomach dropped. It felt like I had swallowed a stone. Air freshener. It was such a stupid lie. Air freshener doesn't cling to the collar of your shirt like a lover's embrace. That was the moment the doubt set in. The suspicion is a terrible thing. It's like a drop of ink in a glass of water. At first, it's just a swirl, but soon, it turns everything dark. I started watching him. Really watching him. I noticed how he took his phone into the bathroom every time he showered. He used to leave it on the nightstand charging. Now, it was glued to his hand. When we sat on the couch to watch TV, he would place the phone face down on the cushion. One evening, about a week later, his phone buzzed on the coffee table while he was in the kitchen getting a glass of water. I stared at the screen. It was lit up. Usually, his notifications showed the sender's name and a preview of the message. But now, it just said, Message 1 notification. He had changed his privacy settings. David walked back into the room and saw me looking at the phone. He moved faster than I had ever seen him move. He snatched it up and shoved it into his pocket. Work, he muttered. They never stop. It's 9 p.m. on a Friday, David, I said softly. I know. It's ridiculous. He didn't look at me. He turned on the TV and stared at the screen, but I could see his leg bouncing nervously. I knew then. I knew it in my bones. But knowing isn't the same as having proof. And I am not a woman who acts on emotion alone. I needed evidence. I needed to know who she was. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I became a detective in my own marriage. I waited for the right moment. It came 3 days later. David was in the shower. He had forgotten his phone on the dresser for the first time in weeks. My heart started hammering against my ribs. It was so loud I was afraid he could hear it over the running water. I walked over to the dresser. My hands were trembling. I pressed the side button. Enter passcode. I typed in our anniversary, 1012. Incorrect passcode. I froze. He had changed it. We had shared the same passcode for a decade. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried his mother's birthday. Incorrect. Phone disabled for 1 minute. I put the phone back exactly how I found it and stepped away. I felt sick. Physically sick. The nausea rose up in my throat. Changing the passcode was a door slamming in my face. It was a declaration of a separate life. But I refused to give up. If I couldn't get into his phone, I would check the one place men always forget to clean. His car. The next morning, while David was in the shower, getting ready for work, I told him I was going out to water the front garden. I took his spare set of car keys from the hook in the hallway. I walked out to the driveway. The morning air was crisp, the birds were singing. It was a beautiful day for a heartbreak. I opened the passenger door of his SUV. It looked clean. Too clean. He had detailed it recently. I opened the glove box. Just the manual and insurance papers. I checked under the seats. Nothing. I was about to give up when I saw it. Tucked into the side pocket of the passenger door, wedged deep in the corner, was a crumpled piece of white paper. I pulled it out and smoothed it flat on my leg. It was a receipt from a restaurant called the Golden Willow. It was a romantic, Italian place on the other side of town. I knew it well. We had gone there for my 35th birthday. The date on the receipt was last Friday. The time was 7:30 p.m. Items ordered: 1 bottle of Pinot Noir, truffle pasta, grilled salmon, Tiramisu. Last Friday. The night he told me he was working late on the big project and eating takeout at his desk. My hands shook as I stared at the paper. But it wasn't the food that caught my eye. It was what was written at the bottom of the receipt, in messy blue ink. Waiters sometimes write thank you, or a smiley face. But this time, someone had written a name and a number. Call me if you need help with the booking next time. Jessica. And right next to it, a phone number. I stared at that name. Jessica. It wasn't a waiter leaving a number for a customer. The handwriting was too intimate, the smiley face too flirtatious. And why would David keep a waiter's number? No. This was her. She must have written it down for him playfully during dinner, maybe as a joke, or maybe he asked for it because he hadn't saved her new number yet. Whatever the reason, he had shoved it in the door pocket and forgotten it. I took my phone out of my pocket and took a picture of the receipt. Then, I crumpled it up and shoved it back exactly where I found it. I walked back into the house, my heart cold as ice. Everything okay? David asked, walking into the kitchen, adjusting his tie. He looked handsome. Innocent. Yes, I said, smiling at him. Just checking the roses. They have thorns, you know? You have to be careful. He didn't notice the edge in my voice. He kissed me and left. As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, I sat down at the kitchen table. I pulled up the photo of the number. I didn't call it. That would be amateur. I saved the number in my contacts under plumber so WhatsApp would sync it. A moment later, a profile picture popped up. The face on the tiny round screen was beaming. She was standing on a beach, the wind whipping her hair across her face, holding a golden retriever puppy. She looked light. That's the only word for it. She looked like someone who didn't have a mortgage, or a husband who worked late, or the heavy, quiet grief of a marriage slowly suffocating. She was young. Maybe late 20s. She had soft features and a smile that seemed to say, I trust the world. I stared at that picture for a long time. I zoomed in on her eyes. I tried to find the malice, the evil that a mistress is supposed to have. But I didn't see it. I just saw a girl. A pretty, happy girl. That hurt more than if she had been ugly or mean. It meant David hadn't just chosen a body, he had chosen an energy. He wanted her lightness. He wanted to escape the reality of us. I found her Instagram easily enough. Her name was Jessica Miller. Her profile was public. I spent the next 3 hours scrolling through her life. I learned that she was an interior decorator. I learned that she loved vintage markets and matcha lattes. I learned that she had moved to the city a year ago. And then, I saw the posts that made my breath catch in my throat. A photo of 2 glasses of wine at the Golden Willow. The caption, date night with my favorite person. Red heart, the date was last Friday. A photo of a bouquet of roses, my favorite roses, pink peonies. Caption, he spoils me. Hashtag lucky girl. He was giving her my life. He was taking the romance, the gestures, the thoughtfulness that used to be mine, and he was gifting them to her, wrapped in lies. I needed to know her. I didn't just want to scream at her, I wanted to understand the transaction. I wanted to look her in the eye and see if she knew about me. Did she know she was destroying a home? Or was she just another victim of his charm? I saw on her profile that she attended a weekly pottery class at a studio downtown on Wednesday evenings. She posted about it constantly. Making mugs for the new apartment. It was Tuesday. The class was tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to David, listening to his heavy breathing, plotting the script of a play he didn't even know he was starring in. The next evening, I told David I was going to a book club meeting. He didn't even look up from his phone. Have fun, hun, he muttered. I drove to the studio. I didn't wear my usual clothes. I dressed down, jeans, a loose sweater, minimal makeup. I took off my wedding ring and placed it in the zippered pocket of my purse. It felt strange, like taking off a limb. I walked into the studio. It smelled of wet clay and dust. There were about 10 people there, sitting at wheels. And there she was. She was even prettier in person. She was wearing an apron covered in gray smears, laughing with the instructor. I walked over to the empty wheel next to her. "Is this seat taken?" I asked. My voice was calm. It didn't shake. I was channeling a woman named Sarah. Sarah was confident. Sarah was single. Sarah didn't have a cheating husband. Jessica looked up and smiled. That bright, bell-like smile. "No, go ahead." "I'm Jessica." "I'm Sarah," I lied. The class began. For the first 20 minutes, we focused on the clay. But the atmosphere was relaxed, and soon, we started chatting. It was terrifyingly easy. She was friendly. She was eager to make connections. "Is this your first time?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. "Yeah," I said. I needed a distraction. Work has been crazy. "I totally get that," she nodded enthusiastically. "I started coming here because my job is so stressful. Dealing with clients all day drains you." We talked about design. We talked about the weather. And then, I cast the bait. "I also just needed to get out of the house," I said, making my voice sound a little sad. "Dating in this city is a nightmare. I just went through a bad breakup." Her face softened instantly. She leaned in, her eyes full of sympathy. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. Men can be the worst." "They really can," I said, looking right at her. "What about you? Are you seeing anyone?" She blushed. A genuine, pink flush rose up her neck. "I am," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But, it's complicated." "Complicated?" I asked. "How so?" She hesitated, biting her lip. She looked around to make sure no one was listening. "He's amazing," she began, her eyes sparkling. "He's older. Sophisticated. He's an architect. He listens to me, he supports my dreams, but he's in a difficult situation right now." My hands tightened around the wet clay on my wheel. "Oh? He's married," she whispered. I didn't blink. "Oh. That is complicated." "I know," she sighed, looking conflicted. "I never thought I'd be that girl. You know? But he's not happy, Sarah. He hasn't been happy for years. He told me his wife is, well, she's very controlling. She's cold. They sleep in separate rooms. He's only staying until he can sort out the finances, so she doesn't take everything he's worked for." I felt a cold rage spread through my chest. Cold. Controlling. Separate rooms. We slept in the same bed every night. I did his laundry. I cooked his meals. I was the one who managed the finances he was so worried about. He wasn't just cheating on me physically. He was assassinating my character to justify it. He was painting me as a villain so he could play the victim in her arms. "That sounds terrible for him," I said, forcing a sympathetic nod. "Does he plan to leave her?" "Yes," Jessica said confidently. "He promised. He says by the end of the year, he'll be free. We're already looking at apartments together, secretly, of course." She looked at me with those big, trusting eyes. She believed every word he said. She wasn't an evil homewrecker. She was a fool in love. And my husband was a master manipulator. I looked at the clay spinning on my wheel. It was shapeless, messy. Just like my life. "Well," I said, turning to her with a smile that felt sharp enough to cut glass. He sounds like a man who knows what he wants. You must be very special to him. I hope so, she beamed. Hey, you're really nice, Sarah. We should grab coffee sometime. I could use a friend who isn't involved in my work circle. This was it. The door was open. I'd love that, I said. Actually, I love to cook. Maybe once we get to know each other better, you could come over for dinner? I make a mean roast beef. That sounds amazing, she chirped. I left the studio that night with her number in my phone, her real number this time, and a plan forming in the dark corners of my mind. David wanted a new life? He wanted to merge his worlds? Fine. I would give him exactly what he wanted. I would bring his two worlds together, and I would watch them collide. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah and Jessica became best friends. For 3 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was Maya, the devoted wife. I ironed David's shirts, asked about his day, and ignored the way he flinched when I touched his shoulder. I watched him text under the table. I watched him smile at his screen with a tenderness he hadn't shown me in years. By afternoon, I was Sarah, Jessica's new best friend. It was sickeningly easy. Jessica was lonely. She was new to the city, isolated by the secrecy of her relationship, and desperate for a female connection. We met for coffee. We went window shopping. We sat on park benches and watched dogs play. And she told me everything. Every time she spoke, she unknowingly twisted the knife in my chest. He felt so guilty last night, she told me over lattes, her eyes misty. He said his wife made him go to her parents for dinner, and she spent the whole night criticizing his career. He said he felt so small. I took a sip of my coffee to hide the tremor in my lip. 2 nights ago, we had gone to my parents'. My father had toasted David's recent promotion. I had held his hand and told the table how proud I was of him. He had beamed. He wasn't just lying to her about his unhappiness, he was rewriting reality. He was stealing my support and turning it into abuse to garner her sympathy. He was making me the villain so he could feel like the hero in his own twisted fairy tale. That sounds awful, I said, my voice steady. Why does he stay? He says he's worried about her mental stability, Jessica whispered. He says she's fragile. If he leaves too abruptly, he's afraid of what she might do to herself. I stared at her. Fragile. I was the one who managed our investments. I was the one who nursed his mother through cancer. I was the rock of our marriage. And he was painting me as a hysterical woman on the edge of a breakdown. He sounds like a saint, I said, the sarcasm so thick I was terrified she'd taste it. He is, she sighed. He just needs an escape. That's why I want to make his birthday special next week. But he says he has to spend it with her. Well, I said, leaning back. Maybe we can celebrate earlier. Why don't you come to my place this Friday? I'll cook. We can have some wine. You've been so stressed, let me pamper you. She lit up. Really? That would be amazing. I'm so tired of hiding in my apartment. It's a date, I said. 7 p.m. I'll text you the address. I didn't tell her I lived with anyone. I wore no ring when I was with her. She assumed Sarah was single and living alone in a nice house. The trap was set. Now I just needed the rat to walk into it. Friday came. I took the day off work. I cleaned the house until it sparkled. I bought the expensive wine. I started the roast beef early, letting the scent fill the hallways. When David came home at 6:30 p.m., he looked tired. He loosened his tie and headed straight for the stairs. I'm going to change and maybe catch up on some emails, he said, not even looking at the table set for 3. Actually, David, I said, stopping him. We have a guest coming. He froze on the bottom step. He turned slowly. A guest? Tonight? Maya, I'm exhausted. Who is it? Your sister? No, I said, smoothing the tablecloth. A new friend I made. She's new to town, doesn't know anyone. I felt bad for her. I wanted to welcome her. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. Maya, please. Can't you just do this another night? I'm not in the mood for small talk with some stranger. It's just one dinner, David, I said, my voice hardening slightly. She's already on her way. Please. For me. Just be charming. You're so good at that. He grumbled something under his breath but nodded. Fine. Give me 10 minutes to wash up. He went upstairs. I stood in the hallway, listening to his footsteps. I checked my watch. 6:55 p.m. I went to the kitchen and checked the roast. Perfect. I checked the envelope sitting in the top drawer of the sideboard. The divorce papers I had met with my lawyer to draft 3 days ago. They were ready. I poured myself a glass of water. My hands were finally shaking. This was the gamble. If Jessica had ever seen a photo of our house, or if David had ever driven her by, she would recognize the address. She would turn around. But David was paranoid. He compartmentalized. I was betting on his own secrecy. 7 p.m. The doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. I heard David's footsteps on the stairs. He was coming down, wearing a fresh shirt, putting on his host face. The face he wore for clients and neighbors. The fake smile. I'll get it, I called out. I walked to the door. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of the life I was about to incinerate. I opened the door. Jessica stood there. She was wearing a beautiful emerald green dress, a color David loved. She held a bottle of wine in a gift bag. She looked nervous but happy. Sarah, she exclaimed, smiling. Wow, your house it's incredible. She didn't recognize it. She had no idea. Come in, Jessica, I said, stepping aside. Welcome. She stepped into the foyer, looking around at the high ceilings, the family photos on the wall, photos I had strategically turned face down or removed earlier that day, leaving only the landscapes and generic art. It smells delicious, she said. Come to the dining room, I said. My partner is just coming down. I led her into the dining room. The candles were lit. The table was set. And then, David walked in. He was adjusting his cuffs, looking down at his watch. So, Maya, what time is this friend of yours? He looked up. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. David stopped mid-step. His face went slack. All the color drained from his skin, leaving him a sickly gray. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His eyes darted from Jessica to me, and then back to Jessica, wide with a horror that was pure and absolute. Jessica dropped the wine bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, the bottle clinking but not breaking. David, she whispered. Her voice was small, confused. She looked at him, then at me. She smiled nervously, a laugh bubbling up that sounded like hysteria. David? What are you doing here? Do you know Sarah? David didn't move. He couldn't. He was a deer in the headlights of a semi-truck named Karma. I walked over to the head of the table. I gestured to the chair opposite David. Jessica, I said, my voice calm, the voice of a gracious hostess. This is David. My husband. I looked at David. David, this is Jessica. My new best friend. Jessica's face crumpled. She looked at me, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Husband? But. Sarah, you said. My name is Maya, I corrected gently. And please, sit down. The roast is getting cold. The sound of the chair scraping against the hardwood floor was deafening. Jessica sat down slowly, her eyes wide and wet, fixed on David. She looked like a child who had just watched a magician saw someone in half, only to realize there was blood on the stage. David didn't sit. He stood by his chair, gripping the back of it so hard his knuckles turned white. Maya, he rasped, his voice sounding like it was being dragged over gravel. What is this? What are you doing? I'm serving dinner, David, I said, picking up the carving knife. It glinted under the chandelier light. I told you. I wanted you to meet my new friend. Sit down. I'm not doing this, he said, shaking his head. Jessica, let's go. Come on. He reached for her arm, but she flinched away from him as if he were burning hot. She looked at his hand, then up at his face, seeing him for the first time without the filter of his lies. Sit down, David, I repeated. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a steel edge to it that he had never heard before. If you walk out that door right now, I promise you, by tomorrow morning, every client, every partner at your firm, and your mother will receive the email I have drafted in my drafts folder. The one with the screenshots. The receipts. The dates. He froze. He looked at me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He realized the trap had already snapped shut. Slowly, defeatedly, he pulled out his chair and sat. I smiled. Good. Now, who wants the end cut? It's the most flavorful. I began to serve the meat. The silence was thick, heavy, suffocating. The only sounds were the clink of the serving fork and the soft thud of roast beef hitting the porcelain plates. I placed a plate in front of Jessica. She stared at it, her hands trembling in her lap. So, Jessica, I said, pouring gravy over my potatoes. You were telling me at the pottery class, which, by the way, David, she's excellent at, that your boyfriend feels trapped. That he lives with a cold, controlling woman. I took a bite of my food. I chewed slowly, savoring it. Is this the woman you described, David? I asked, looking at him. The one who irons your shirts every Sunday? The one who managed your mother's hospice care? Is that the cold woman? David stared at his plate. Maya, stop. No, Jessica whispered. Her voice was shaking. She looked at David, tears spilling over her lashes. You told me you slept in separate rooms. You told me you hadn't touched her in 2 years. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. 2 years? I looked at David. David, tell her. Tell her about last Sunday morning. Tell her about our anniversary 3 weeks ago. David shut his eyes tight. Please. He's lying to you, Jessica, I said, turning my attention to her. He didn't want to leave me. He wanted to have us both. He wanted the steady, reliable wife to run his life and the young, exciting girlfriend to make him feel like a man again. He wanted his cake, and he wanted to eat it too. Jessica covered her mouth with her hand. A sob escaped. I didn't know, she choked out. I swear, Sarah. Maya. I didn't know. He told me the divorce was already filed. He said you were just roommates. I believe you, I said surprisingly gently. And I did. Looking at her, broken and humiliated in my dining room, I knew she wasn't the enemy. She was just the weapon he had used. He's very convincing. He convinced me for 12 years that he was a good man. I am a good man. David suddenly shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. I made a mistake, Maya. I'm human. I was weak. Weak? I put down my fork. Weak is forgetting to take out the trash. Weak is skipping the gym. This wasn't weakness, David. This was calculation. You changed your phone password. You created a fake work schedule. You bought a second phone. I found the receipt for the burner SIM in your jacket pocket yesterday. He went pale again. You weren't weak, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. You were deliberate. I reached under the table and pulled out a large, thick manila envelope. I placed it on the table, right in the center, next to the centerpiece of dead roses I had arranged, a symbolic touch he hadn't even noticed. I promised you a main course, I said. I slid the envelope toward him. It knocked over the salt shaker. What is this? He asked, staring at it like it was a bomb. Open it. He hesitated, his hand shaking as he reached for the clasp. He pulled out the stack of papers. He read the first page. His shoulders slumped. Divorce papers, he whispered. Signed, I added. And a copy of the deed transfer for the house. And a forensic accounting of our joint assets, half of which have been moved to a secure account as of this morning. You can't just. He stammered. I can, I said. And I did. I've been busy, David. While you were working late at the Golden Willow, I was meeting with the best divorce attorney in the city. I turned to Jessica. She was staring at the papers, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. And for you, Jessica, I said, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out a small velvet box. It looked like a jewelry box. She recoiled. I don't want anything from you. It's not from me, I said. It's from him. I opened the box. Inside was a diamond necklace. David gasped. Maya, don't. I found this in his briefcase, I told Jessica. Hidden in the side lining. There was a card with it. For my beautiful Jay. Can't wait for our future. He bought it with our joint credit card. Technically, I paid for half of this. I slid the box across the table to her. Take it, I said. It's the only thing of value you're ever going to get from him. Because after the alimony and the legal fees, he's not going to be the sophisticated architect you thought he was. He's going to be a middle-aged man living in a studio apartment, paying for his mistakes. Jessica looked at the necklace, then at David. The adoration that had been in her eyes at the pottery class was gone. Replaced by disgust. She stood up. Her chair scraped loudly again. You bought this with her money? She asked David, her voice trembling with rage. David looked down, unable to meet her gaze. You're pathetic, she spat. She didn't take the necklace. She grabbed her purse. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I really am. Then she turned and ran out of the room. We heard the front door open and slam shut. The silence rushed back into the room, heavier than before. It was just me and David now. The candles were burning low. The roast beef was cold. David sat there, staring at the divorce papers. He looked small. Deflated. The charm was gone. The arrogance was gone. He looked up at me, tears in his eyes. Maya, please. We can fix this. 12 years. You can't just throw away 12 years over a fling. I picked up my wine glass and took a slow sip. I looked at him over the rim, feeling a strange, calm emptiness where my heart used to be. I didn't throw it away, David, I said softly. You did. I just took out the trash. The sound of the front door closing behind David that night was the quietest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't a slam. It wasn't a dramatic exit. It was just a soft click. And just like that, 12 years ended. I didn't cry immediately. I stood in the dining room, looking at the scene. The candles had burned down to nubs, dripping wax onto the tablecloth. The wine in Jessica's glass was untouched. The roast beef was cold and congealed on the plates. I methodically cleared the table. I scraped the expensive food into the trash. It felt symbolic. All that effort, all that preparation, just to end up in the bin. But as I washed the dishes, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, I realized something strange. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The knot in my stomach, the one that had been there since the moment I smelled vanilla on his shirt, was gone. David stayed at a hotel that night. He texted me 3 times. "Maya, please answer. I have nowhere to go. We need to talk about this rationally." I didn't reply. I blocked his number for the night. I needed peace. I needed to sleep in the middle of the bed. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics. The public dismantling of a marriage is much messier than the private heartbreak. David tried to control the narrative. I heard from a mutual friend, Linda, that David was telling people we were taking a break because we had grown apart. He was trying to save face. He was trying to protect his reputation as the upstanding architect, the good guy. He didn't know that the truth has a way of leaking out, like water through a cracked foundation. I didn't go on a smear campaign. I didn't post angry rants on Facebook. I didn't beg people to take my side. I simply stopped lying for him. When his mother called me, weeping, asking why I had kicked her son out, I didn't yell. I just spoke with a quiet, devastating honesty. I didn't kick him out because we grew apart, Martha, I told her gently. I asked him to leave because he has been in a relationship with a 26-year-old woman for 8 months. He brought her into our lives. He spent our anniversary money on her. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, David." She didn't argue. She knew me. She knew I didn't make things up. The disappointment in her voice was heavier than any anger could have been. The real blow to David came about a month later. I was at the grocery store, standing in the produce aisle, squeezing avocados. I looked up and saw one of David's colleagues, a man named Peter. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Maya," he said. "Good to see you." "Hi, Peter," I smiled. "How is the firm?" He hesitated, then sighed. It's been tense." David isn't, he's not focused. He missed a major deadline last week. The partners are not happy. I nodded politely. "I'm sorry to hear that." And Peter lowered his voice, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "There was a bit of a scene in the lobby yesterday." My eyebrows shot up. "A scene?" "A young woman," Peter said, looking embarrassed. "She came to drop off a box of his things. She was very loud. She told the receptionist to tell David that he's a spineless liar and that if he tries to contact her again, she's calling the police." I felt a small, grim smile tug at the corner of my mouth. Jessica. She hadn't gone quietly. Once the shock of that dinner wore off, her sadness had turned into rage. She had realized that she wasn't just the other woman, she was a victim too. She had been promised a future that was built on a lie. "That sounds unfortunate," I said to Peter. "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. David looked pretty broken, Maya. He's staying in a furnished rental downtown. He looks 10 years older. I finished my shopping and drove home. My house now, was quiet. I didn't feel joy hearing about his downfall. I thought I would. I thought I would want to dance on the ashes of his life. But instead, I just felt a deep, profound pity. He had had everything. He had a home filled with love. He had a wife who would have walked through fire for him. He had respect. He had stability. And he had traded it all for an ego boost. He had traded it for a few months of feeling like a big man with a young girl. Now, he had neither of us. Jessica despised him because he lied to her. I was done with him because he betrayed me. He was alone in a rented room, surrounded by boxes, with nothing but his freedom. The freedom he claimed he wanted so badly. One afternoon, I came home to find a car parked in my driveway. It was David's. He was standing by the front door. He looked thinner. His shirt was wrinkled. I wasn't there to iron it anymore. He looked like a shadow of the man I had married. I got out of my car and walked up the driveway. I didn't feel afraid. I felt indifferent. "You changed the locks," he said. It wasn't an accusation, it was just a sad statement of fact. "My lawyer advised it," I said, stopping a few feet away from him. "What do you want, David?" "I miss you," he said. His voice cracked. "I miss this house. I miss us. Maya, I messed up. I know I did. But can't we just talk? Just one coffee? I'm going crazy without you." He took a step toward me. In the past, my instinct would have been to comfort him. To fix him. To smooth over the edges of his pain. But I looked at him, and I realized I didn't know him anymore. The man I loved was a fiction. This man in front of me, this liar, this cheater, this stranger, was nothing to me. "No, David," I said firmly. "We can't talk." We said everything we needed to say at that dinner table. "But I love you," he pleaded. "No," I shook my head. "You love the way I made you feel. You love the safety I gave you. You don't love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have been able to look me in the eye for 8 months while you were sleeping with her." I walked past him to the door and unlocked it. I turned back one last time. "Please leave your key on the porch," I said. "And please don't come back without calling my attorney first." I stepped inside and closed the door. I locked it. I leaned my back against the wood and listened. I heard him stand there for a long minute. Then, I heard the heavy, defeated footsteps walking away. I heard his car engine start. I heard him drive away. I was alone. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't lonely. It has been exactly 1 year since the night of the dinner party. They say time heals all wounds, but I don't think that's quite right. Time doesn't make the scar disappear, it just makes it part of your skin. It becomes a map of where you've been, proof that you survived the cut. My life looks very different now. I kept the house. It was hard at first. Every corner held a ghost. The armchair where David used to read the paper. The kitchen island where we drank our coffee. For the first few months, I felt like I was living in a museum of a failed marriage. So, I changed it. I painted the dining room a soft, warm sage green, covering the dark navy walls that David had always insisted on. I sold the heavy mahogany table, the one where I served the divorce papers, and bought a round, rustic oak one. It's smaller, more intimate. It's a table for friends, not for performances. I spent the summer in the garden. I pulled out the exotic, high-maintenance plants that David liked to show off to the neighbors. I planted wildflowers instead. Daisies, lavender, sunflowers. Things that grow wild and free. Things that don't need to be perfect to be beautiful. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office. The fluorescent lights were humming. David was there, sitting at the other end of the long conference table. He wouldn't look at me. He looked tired, his shoulders hunched. The arrogance that had defined him for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet resignation. When I signed the final decree, the scratching of the pen on the paper sounded loud in the quiet room. Maya Reynolds. I didn't keep his name. I wanted my own name back. I wanted the woman I was before I became David's wife. As we left the office, we ended up in the elevator together. Just the two of us. It was the longest 30 seconds of my life. Maya, he said softly, staring at the numbers changing on the display. Are you happy? I looked at him. I really looked at him. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel love. I just felt a distant, calm pity. I'm peaceful, David, I said. And that's better than happy. The doors opened, and I walked out into the sunshine. I didn't look back. I heard from Linda that David is living in a small apartment on the edge of town. He dates occasionally, but nothing sticks. He's known as the man who lost everything. It's a heavy label to carry. And Jessica? I ran into her once, about 6 months ago. I was at a bookstore, reaching for a novel, and our hands almost touched. She flinched when she saw me. She looked terrified, bracing herself for me to yell, to cause a scene. But I just smiled. A real, small smile. Hello, Jessica, I said. She blinked, stunned. Hi. Maya. You look well, I said. And she did. She looked a little older, a little wiser, but the lightness was coming back into her eyes. I wanted to write to you, she stammered, clutching a book to her chest. To apologize again. I felt so guilty for so long. Don't, I said gently. He lied to both of us. You were just the mirror he used to look at himself. When the mirror broke, he had to face reality. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Thank you. You saved me, you know. If you hadn't done what you did, I might have married him. I might be you in 10 years. I know, I said. Be careful with your heart, Jessica. It's precious. We parted ways. We aren't friends, that would be too strange, but we aren't enemies either. We are just two women who survived the same storm. My life now is quiet, but it is full. I started my own landscape design business. I help people build gardens that bring them joy. I spend my weekends hiking, reading, and having dinner with friends who know the real me. I've learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely. When I was married to David, lying in bed next to him while he texted another woman, that was loneliness. That was a hollow, aching silence that filled the whole house. Now, the silence in my home is different. It's the silence of peace. It's the sound of a life that belongs entirely to me. I wake up when I want. I drink my coffee, with hazelnut cream, which David hated, and I watch the birds in my garden. I don't have a perfect, magazine cover life anymore. I don't have the power couple status. But I have the truth. And the truth is, I cooked dinner for his mistress not to destroy her, but to free myself. I set the table for 3 that night, but I was the only one who walked away with a full plate. I walked away with my dignity. I walked away with my future. Sometimes, you have to burn the fantasy to the ground to build something real from the ashes. Looking back, I realized that the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. The hardest part was trusting myself again. For so long, I ignored the little voice in my head, the one that noticed the coffee he didn't drink, the scent on his shirt, the distance in his eyes. I tried to silence my intuition to save my happiness. But true happiness can't exist in the dark. I know some people might think what I did was cold. They might think I should have just packed my bags and left quietly. But I needed to see the truth. I needed to bring the lies into the light, not to hurt them, but to heal myself. I needed to know that I wasn't crazy, I was just being deceived. If you are sitting there right now, feeling that knot in your stomach, feeling like something in your own life doesn't add up, please, listen to that feeling. Your intuition is your best friend. Don't let anyone make you doubt your own reality. You deserve a love that is honest, a home that is safe, and a partner who chooses you every single day, not just when it's convenient. So, I have to ask you. If you found out your partner was living a double life, how would you handle it? Would you have walked away quietly, or would you have set the table for three, just like I did? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories remind me that none of us are truly alone. If this story touched you, or if you've ever had to find the strength to choose yourself, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We are building a community here, a safe space for our voices, our truths, and our healing. Until next time, take care of your heart. You are stronger than you know.